Welcome to Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a really significant proposed change to U.S. immigration regulations. It's one that could reshape the experience for, well, hundreds of thousands of international students, exchange visitors, and foreign media representatives across the country.
Yeah, it's definitely got a lot of people talking.
Exactly. It touches on everything, from academic life to national security. So, for many years, certain groups, we're talking F academic students, J exchange visitors, and foreign media reps, they've been admitted under a system called duration of status, or DS. But now, the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, they're proposing to swap that out for a fixed time period. What does this actually mean for you if you're in one of these categories, or maybe thinking about coming to the U.S.? We're going to unpack all of this, explore the why behind it, the specifics, the potential impact.
And how it filters down to individuals and universities, too.
Right. This is where I think the policy's deeper implications really come into focus. How a seemingly administrative tweak could ripple through someone's entire life here.
It's fascinating, the existing duration of status system. For F, J, and most I non-immigrants, DS basically means you can stay in the U.S. as long as you're doing what you came here to do, your program, your assignment, plus a grace period afterwards.
Okay.
This was brought in largely for F1 students back in '79, and then for I and J folks in '85. Part of the reason was actually to simplify things, cut down on paperwork.
So if your degree program was, say, 5 years long, your status generally covered you for that whole time, as long as you stayed enrolled, followed the rules.
Pretty much, yeah. And extensions were often handled right there at the school level by the designated school official, the DSO.
So why was DS preferred back then, instead of just giving everyone a fixed date?
Well, initially the government saw it as saving money and manpower. More efficient use of resources,
Makes sense.
But despite that administrative ease over the decades, concerns started creeping in about oversight and the potential for abuse.
Right, the flexibility that was meant to help.
Exactly. It might have created some unforeseen vulnerabilities, which is what's driving this push for change now.
So what were those specific concerns that really started to build up? Okay, let's unpack the core of this proposal. Replacing DS with a fixed time period.
Yeah.
So instead of staying for the duration, people would get a specific end date on their admission.
That's the main thrust, yes. A specific, predetermined length of time. And after that expires, you'd need to apply for what's called an extension of stay, or EOS.
An EOS. Oh.
And this changes, well, it's quite significant. Under the proposal, if you're an F or J non-immigrant, you'd generally be admitted for a maximum of 4 years.
4 years max.
Or the length of your program listed on your Form I-20 for students, or DS 2019 for exchange visitors.
Right.
Those are your eligibility documents, whichever time is shorter.
Shorter, okay.
And then after that admission period ends, you'd get an extra 30-day grace period to pack up, leave, or try to get some other kind of lawful status.
Wait, 30 days. Isn't the current grace period 60 days for F1 students?
It is, so that's a reduction.
Wow, a 4-year limit, even for a typical bachelor's degree. That feels really tight. What if your program just naturally takes longer? Like a PhD, those often run 5, 6, 7 years.
Yeah.
Or what if you need more time for perfectly valid academic reasons?
Exactly your point. That's where this extension of stay, the EOS application, comes in. You'd have to formally apply to USCIS, that's U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services.
Another application, another process.
Right. And the rationale given is that this allows immigration officers to, and I'm quoting here, periodically and directly assess whether these non-immigrants are complying with the conditions of their classifications and U.S. immigration laws.
So more direct check-ins by USCIS.
That's the idea.
But I can already hear the counter-argument. The extra bureaucracy, the cost, the uncertainty this creates, especially for students who are genuinely just trying to finish their degrees. How does DHS see that balance?
That's a central tension in this whole debate, definitely.
So why the big push for this now? What are the core concerns driving DHS? You mentioned program integrity, fraud, even national security risks.
Well, if you look at the bigger picture, DHS points to the sheer increase in the number of F, J, and I non-immigrants. It's a volume issue.
How much of an increase are we talking?
F1 student admissions have sextupled since 1980. Sextupled. And since DS came in for J and I folks in '85, the number of J exchange visitors has more than quadrupled, and I media reps have nearly doubled.
Huge numbers.
Yeah. And DHS argues the current DS system just hasn't kept pace, that it undermines their ability to track compliance effectively, and frankly, creates openings for fraud and abuse.
I remember after 9/11, there was a lot of focus on student visas, which led to the SEVIS system, right? The tracking database.
The Student and Exchange Visitor Information System.
Is this new proposal kind of building on that? An evolution of trying to tighten oversight?
You could certainly see it that way, yes. It builds on those earlier mandates. DHS has flagged instances where people have used, say, an F student visa to stay in the US for decades. Yeah, by just continuously enrolling in programs or hopping between schools. They cited one example of someone at a dance school from 1991 to 2021. 17 program extensions.
Wow. 30 years at a dance school on a student visa.
Another example was someone spending over 22 years just in language training programs. Now, these situations might not always be strictly illegal under the current rules, but they definitely raise questions about the temporary stay intention that's fundamental to these visas.
So it's about these extreme outliers, but also maybe a broader sense that the temporary aspect isn't always being enforced.
I think it's both. The outliers highlight the potential loophole, but the sheer volume makes tracking everyone challenging. And then layered on top of that are the national security concerns.
Right, you mentioned those. What kind of specific security issues have come up?
Well, there have been documented cases, espionage through student programs, unfortunately.
Really?
Yes. For instance, a Chinese national, Ji Chaoquan, studying electrical engineering, was actually sentenced for spying for the Chinese government. Another case involved a J1 exchange visitor, a researcher at Harvard who was caught trying to smuggle undeclared biological materials out of the country, believed to be heading for China.
Biological materials.
Yes. And there are other examples, a J1 visa holder charged with acting as an agent for a foreign government while they were a student. Even an officer with China's People's Liberation Army arrested after allegedly lying on his visa application while doing research here.
These are serious incidents.
They absolutely are, and they highlight the kind of vulnerability DHS feels exists when oversight relies more on self-reporting or school reporting rather than direct periodic vetting by trained immigration officers. The fixed period proposal aims to insert those mandatory check-ins.
So the idea is these periodic EOS applications would give officers a chance to catch potential issues like these.
That's the stated goal, a mechanism for regular review to deter and detect such activities more effectively than the current DS system might allow.
Okay, let's dive deeper then into the specifics for F1 academic students. Beyond the general 4-year limit, what else is in this proposal for them?
There are several key things. For language training students, for example, there'd be a new cap, a total aggregate limit of 24 months of study. That includes any breaks and vacation time.
24 months total for language study. Why that specifically?
Well, DHS found cases, like we mentioned, of people enrolling in language programs for years, even decades, sometimes even after completing degree programs that required English proficiency. So it raised questions about whether the primary intent was really temporary study.
Got it. What about changing your major? That happens all the time, especially for undergrads figuring things out.
That's addressed too. Undergraduate F1 students generally wouldn't be allowed to switch majors during their very first academic year, though there might be some exceptions.
First year lock-in, okay.
And it's even stricter for graduate students. The proposal would restrict them from changing their educational objectives or even transferring schools from within the U.S.
Wow. No changing grad programs or transferring? That seems really restrictive. What's the reasoning there?
The concern DHS raises is about individuals potentially using admission to a well-regarded school as a way to get into the country, and then immediately switching to a different program, maybe one that's less rigorous or perhaps in a field considered sensitive.
Sensitive fields, like?
They pointed to cases where someone declared, say, humanities initially, but then transferred into something like nuclear science. And in some instances, those individuals were later arrested for spying.
Okay, I see the connection they're drawing.
Yeah.
So with all these limits in the 4-year cap, what does this mean for students just trying to make, normal progress in their studies? Sometimes things happen.
The rule does try to clarify what would be acceptable reasons for needing an extension, an EOS.
Like what?
Things like compelling academic reasons. Maybe you had to change your research topic, or you ran into unexpected research problems, or there were delays in funding. Also, documented illness or medical condition.
Okay, medical issues make sense.
Or exceptional circumstances beyond the student's control. Think natural disasters, a major health crisis like a pandemic. Maybe your university suddenly closes.
Right, things you truly couldn't predict.
Exactly. But importantly, things like being on academic probation or suspension, or just repeatedly not being able to complete your coursework, those generally would not be considered valid reasons for an extension.
So the expectation is you need to be progressing reasonably well.
That seems to be the underlying message, yes. A focus on bona fide students committed to finishing their program in a reasonable time frame.
Now, these changes aren't just for F1 students. How do J1 exchange visitors and foreign media representatives fit into this proposed new framework?
For J1 exchange visitors, it's a very similar story. Moving away from DS to a fixed admission period, also capped generally at 4 years.
Same 4-year cap.
Generally, yes. And J1 categories are incredibly diverse, professors, research scholars, au pairs, trainees. The rule aims to bring their oversight more in line with F1s, citing similar concerns about national security and potential fraud. Remember the example of the research scholars charged with smuggling biological pathogens. That involved J1s.
Right, so parallel concerns leading to parallel proposals. And what about the I-visa holders, the foreign media folks? How does this affect them?
For I-non-immigrants, the proposed admission period is much shorter, generally not to exceed 240 days or the time needed for their specific assignment, whichever is shorter.
240 days, that's about 8 months.
Correct, and extensions would also be possible, typically in increments of up to 240 days.
Okay.
The rule also takes the step of formally defining foreign media organization in the regulations, emphasizing regular journalistic activity and a home office abroad. And it defines journalistic information, clarifying that the content needs to be primarily informational reporting, documentaries, not mainly entertainment or promotional stuff.
So codifying existing practice, basically.
Largely, yes, aligning the regulations with how the Department of State and USCIS already tend to operate, but making it explicit.
Okay, so with these fixed periods comes the need for extensions of stay, the EOS process. That sounds like it could get complicated and costly.
Yeah.
What does it actually involve for the individual?
Yeah, this is a crucial part of the proposal. It means filing a specific form, the EOS application, directly with USCIS.
Which likely means fees.
Yes, definitely fees. And likely requires providing biometrics, fingerprints, photo, maybe even an in-person interview.
An interview too, okay.
And DHS has actually estimated the numbers here. They project an annual average of about 205,000 F visa holders needing EOS, around 203,000 J visa holders, and maybe 6,000 I visa holders applying each year over a 10-year projection.
That's over 400,000 extension applications a year.
Roughly, yeah. And the estimated annual cost, this includes government costs and costs to the applicants, is projected somewhere between $390 and $392 million.
Wow, nearly $400 million a year. That really underscores the scale of this administrative shift. It's not just a minor change, it's a massive undertaking.
Absolutely. A significant re-engineering of how these statuses are managed.
So what happens if, say, you're an F1 student, you've applied for your EOS, but you need to travel internationally while that application is still pending with USCIS?
And this is where it gets particularly tricky for people. For both F and J non-immigrants, if you leave the U.S. while your EOS application is pending, USCIS would consider that application abandoned.
Abandoned. So you travel, you lose your application.
That's the proposal. It could create some really difficult situations for people needing to travel for emergencies or even academic conferences, though applications for related work authorization might potentially continue processing.
That's a huge potential snag. And what about the consequences of overstaying? You mentioned the fixed end date. Does that change how unlawful presence is calculated?
Yes, significantly. Under the current DS system, unlawful presence, which is being in the U.S. without authorization after your permitted stay ends, and it has serious consequences, usually only starts ticking after there's been an official finding by DHS or an immigration judge that you violated your status.
Okay, so there's usually a formal determination first.
Right, but under this proposed rule, unlawful presence would begin accruing immediately the day after your fixed admission period expires on your I-94 form. That's your arrival departure record.
Immediately. So no formal finding needed. Just boom, the day after your date hits.
Exactly. Which dramatically increases the risk for individuals accidentally accruing unlawful presence, maybe due to confusion or processing delays with their EOs. And accruing unlawful presence can trigger bars to re-entering the U.S. for 3 or even 10 years once you depart.
That sounds like a lot more pressure, a much higher stakes situation for everyone involved. Students, universities trying to advise them, media organizations managing assignments.
It definitely raises the stakes considerably.
Now, you mentioned this isn't the first time we've seen proposals like this. A similar rule from the Trump administration was actually withdrawn back in 2021.
That's correct.
So, given that history, what's been the general reaction to this kind of policy shift? especially from groups representing international students or educational institutions?
The reactions have been pretty strong and largely critical from those communities. Major education organizations, for example, have voiced significant concerns.
What are they saying?
They've characterized the proposal as, quote, unnecessary and counterproductive. They argue it creates needless uncertainty, gets the government too involved in academic decisions, and just piles on bureaucratic hurdles and costs.
Counterproductive how?
Their fear is that it will deter talented international students, researchers, and scholars from choosing the U.S., that it could hurt American innovation, the economy, global competitiveness. Some have even called it a dangerous overreach by government into academia because it shifts oversight powers from schools to USCIS officers.
Strong words. It ties into this idea we look at, ISM policy pervasion. This notion that visa rules aren't just legal status things. They seep into every part of a student's life.
Absolutely. It's a powerful concept. It highlights how these policies, even ones that seem purely administrative, really permeate the lived experience.
Affecting academics, work, even relationships. Can you get some examples of that?
Sure, like the requirement to always maintain a full course load. While seemingly straightforward, it can cause immense mental health stress if a student is struggling, but can't easily reduce their course load without complicated medical proof. It can hinder academic recovery or make returning after a medical leave difficult.
Yeah, I can see that pressure.
Or employment limits, like the strict 20-hour work week during the semester. It can lead to financial strain, sometimes pushing students towards risky, off-the-books work to make ends meet.
And how does this pervasion play out in terms of future plans or even personal relationships? Things that are so important, especially when you're young and studying abroad.
We've seen research capturing stories of students feeling intense temporal stress, this constant anxiety about finishing their degree before their time runs out. One student even admitted cutting a whole chapter from their thesis just to meet a visa deadline.
Wow, impacting the academic work itself.
Exactly. And the temporary nature of the visa introduces instability into relationships. Students often have to prepare partners for the very real possibility they might have to leave the country suddenly.
That's incredibly stressful.
It can even influence major choices, maybe picking a field based purely on perceived post-graduation visa options rather than genuine passion. And sometimes, just the fear of misunderstanding complex rules creates a chilling effect, making students hesitant to participate fully in campus life, like joining political groups, for fear of accidentally violating some obscure rule.
These are really profound personal impacts stemming from what looks like high-level policy changes.
They really are micro-level consequences from macro-level decisions.
So wrapping this up, what we've discussed today really highlights a major proposed shift in U.S. immigration policy for FJ and I non-immigrants.
Moving from that flexible duration of status to fixed admission periods.
Driven by DHS concerns about program integrity, fraud, and national security. The goal seems to be tighter oversight through more direct, periodic checks by immigration officers.
Right, which means new requirements for extensions of stay, stricter rules around changing programs, and potentially higher costs and a lot more paperwork for everyone.
And as we explored, these policy shifts aren't just abstract. They can deeply affect an individual's academic path, their job prospects, even their personal lives, showing just how tangled immigration rules are with the day-to-day reality for international students and professionals here.
It really underscores that connection.
We hope this deep dive has given you a clear picture of these complex proposals and what they might mean. It's definitely a conversation that's going to continue. All the best, and we will meet again with another important subject in the next meeting.